So we've been talking about the nervous system, and we've been talking about neurons, who are the prima donna rock stars. But today we'll have a short lecture on their managers and roadies. We're going to look at the 6 different types, their locations, and their general functions. Glial cells, or neuroglia, make up about 90% of nervous tissue and have the general role of supporting in various ways the neuron. Basically, without the glia, those rock star neurons would find themselves unable to perform and probably broke down in an alley, overdosed on heroin somewhere. So support is the general function, but you'll want to know the particular functions for each of these minions. And the other thing you want to pay attention to is where those particular glial cells are located within the central nervous system. And most of these we've encountered before or made brief mention of. When discussing the blood-brain barrier, I mentioned that the nervous system has its own private immune system. So this immune function is largely carried out by microglia cells, which are phagocytes, that is, cells who seek out and destroy invaders. They also seek out and destroy damaged or dying neurons. The other type shown here are the ependymal cells, which you will find lining the ventricles and central canal. There are also those specialized ependymal cells that produce the cerebral spinal fluid within the choroid plexus. And I've also mentioned the glial cell astrocytes, and this was in context of the blood-brain barrier. But astrocytes have other important functions. Active neurons create a lot of messy waste, lots of neurotransmitter spillover, and a lot of metabolic byproducts. So once these rock stars have trashed the hotel room, the astrocytes come in behind them and clean up. So by doing so, they're maintaining this delicate interstitial environment. Also, nervous tissue does not have supporting connective tissue like most other tissues in the body. Here, astrocytes help provide a physical framework that the neurons live in. And they actually have many more crucial functions involved in neural wiring and communication, but for those 2 reasons alone, it's no surprise they are most abundant type of glia in the nervous system. And they're most famous, especially in nursing exams, for their part in forming the blood-brain barrier, which we've already discussed. And the last type of central nervous system glial cell is a cell that I may have alluded to when talking about myelinated axons and white matter in the central nervous system. Oligodendrocytes are the glial cells that form those myelin sheaths. And that myelin sheath is an extension of the oligodendrocytes membrane, or their dendrites, that wrap around the neuron's axons. And because it's just a lipid bilayer of the cell membrane, where in areas where large groups of axon are passing through, the tissue has a white appearance. So when you're looking at white matter, what you're looking at is swaths of myelinated axons. So these white matter areas are regions that signals are just being passed through. Gray matter, on the other hand, is a dense aggregation of cell bodies and dendrites and local circuit unmyelinated axons. So this gray matter is where all the information processes are going on. So the gray matter is where the show is being made, and the white matter is just the cable passing the output to another location. And the function of the myelin sheath is to insulate the axons, which vastly increase the conduction speed of the signal passing down the axon. This happens, for all we're concerned, by magic, although you are required to know that spaces in between adjacent sections of the myelin sheath of an axon is called the node of Ranvier. This node is so important to physiologists that the section of myelin sheath between nodes is called an internode. So there's another glial cell that makes up the myelin sheath of axons. And this glial cell, however, makes up the myelin sheath of axons outside the central nervous system in the periphery. These are the axons of motor and sensory neurons that course through the peripheral nerves. So here we see the nodes between the sections of myelin, and again those sections are called the internodes. And notice here that each internode is actually an individual Schwann cell that makes up that segment. So this is in contrast to myelination of axons in the central nervous system, where oligodendrocytes may cover a few sections of multiple different axons. And the last type of glial cell is that second type of glial cell found in the peripheral nervous system. These are called satellite cells. They're found around the cell bodies of sensory neurons, which are located, remember, just outside the central nervous system. Satellite cells insulate the cell bodies and help regulate the extracellular fluid around the sensory neurons. So that's it for the glial cells. Remember their types, their functions, and where they are generally located. See you next time.